welcome to LOA Today. Walt and life coach Joel Elston here. Today is Thursday, February 15th, 2018, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. Your first daily dose of happy for the day. And Joel, how you doing? I hope things have been going well for you.
It's been a great week. Things continue to go well. I'm really excited to be here again today. I look forward to Thursdays now very much every week.
I do too. I look forward to all the days, but I especially look forward to Thursdays because that's when you and I get to catch up, and I like that part a lot. So yeah, I agree.
Yes, it's something we've done together for a while now, and had a little break there for a little bit, but it's so good to be back doing this. And the few people that I hear from people occasionally who catch the show or catch the podcast, and it's really a very positive. It's really touching some people's lives, and as I've always told you, if not one person listens, the fact that you and I get to do this every week is a great benefit to me.
Yeah, and it is a great benefit to me too. I mean, I can actually feel now, in a way more so than when we were doing it weekly together. I can feel it in a big way how it's affecting my emotional set point. And you remember what it was like, early on. I had trouble believing I could even move it. Now I'm moving it with ease, and it's great, and I'm loving it.
Yes.
I'm loving being in that place where you just feel good all day long. And
yes.
It's good. It's good stuff.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So this week, you and I, right before we went on air, showing our great planning skills, we were discussing what our topic would be today.
Well,
it's one of my favorite.
Yeah.
Oh, I will. It's one of my favorite concepts of the law of attraction is, we say this a lot, but it's the law of attraction just simply brings what you think about. And I posted on Facebook today, talking about our problems is our greatest addiction.
Yes.
And in my work, the concept for me of addiction work and helping people with addiction, almost everything I deal with, even if they don't come to me with an identifiable addiction, has an addictive component to it. And I talk about depression for some people has an addictive component to it. We have, anxiety. Certain behaviors have an addiction to them, at least an addictive thought process to them. And really, the people that complain and all you do is talk about your problems, that is really the ultimate example. If anybody ever has any doubt that the law of attraction works completely, is look at the people who complain constantly and talk about their problems. They are full blast law of attraction, attracting more and more problems. Now, that's not their intent.
No.
But the idea of the constant complaining, it is amazing how that connection that we see with the law of attraction and how they're brought to that. One on Tuesday, I prepared myself mentally. I had to go to the Social Security office on Tuesday, and the reason I did that is I've recently, last year, at the end of the year, I adopted my foster son, Justin, and one of the last steps in the process is, we've gotten the birth certificate back, the new birth certificate, and you have to go change his Social Security card name. And that's one thing they can't do via mail. It has to be done in person.
Okay.
So now, there's a few things and so I don't want to use the law of attraction against me. So one of the things I really do not enjoy going to the Social Security office, because at least my history, the few times I've had to go, you almost need to plan for an entire day, no matter how simple the task. So I mentally said, look, I'm bringing plenty of material to work on. I took the entire morning off. I was going to get there early, and I prepared. I brought every piece of potential, everything from my Social Security card, all the court documents, his previous Social Security card, everything that I possibly could imagine. So I was over-prepared. I filled out the form ahead of time. All of these are things, and there's a reason I'm discussing it with you, so I'm mentally prepared for this to be a really good experience. And so I walked in, filled out, and one of the things that's tangible in that, and this is not being critical of other people, almost everybody in that environment, for the most part, was there with a negative mindset base. They've been denied their disability. Their life is really difficult for them. And as I sat there, I heard, not listening because I had headphones on, but in between just taking my headphones off, the conversation was everyone discussing their problems or their disability.
Right, sure.
And that was something that I am not being critical of anyone's situation. I'm just looking from my perspective of their entire life revolved around their disability and are they going to be getting assistance and their dependence on the system. And I felt so sorry for a lot of the people there because they've been conditioned to believe this is their only way to survive.
Right.
And it does allow them to survive. However, it is not a process that ever allows anyone to thrive.
Yes. And when you're in an environment like that, you can feel it. Like you said, it's tangible.
Yes.
You can practically taste it. You can smell it in the air. And it's not a pleasant feeling. It's a very unpleasant feeling. So you walk into a place like that, and I understand why you put your headphones on. You usually want to block it out any way you can possibly do it. Because it
absolutely.
Just
and I was
everything.
I was actually listening to, as I talked to you about before, I'm working on a doctorate in metaphysics, so I had a lecture to listen to. So it was actually based on sort of that concept of the lecture was a gentleman that was talking about how worry unintentionally attracts more things to worry about, and so that was a perfect thing to be listening to of what I was in the middle of. But from what we do, and the reason that this is so relevant is to identify it. It's not for us to get stuck in that, but it's for us to identify when we talk about our problems, we're energizing those problems and putting them out there.
Yes.
The good news about this whole trip is I went prepared for this to be a great visit. I walked in with a great attitude. I wasn't in a rush. I was shocked that within probably 17 minutes of me signing in, I was called. I had all of my documentation. The gentleman was exceptionally professional and nice. He said, "You are the most prepared person I've ever had walk up to the counter. I don't need 90% of what you brought." And he basically typed the stuff in, gave me a temporary insurance card, and in less than 30 minutes, I was out the door.
Fantastic.
And yeah, and I really attribute that. I went in with the concept of lowered expectations, not meaning when I say that, not to be negative. I wasn't going to worry if I was there 2 or 3 hours. That's just part of the process, I thought.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't going to allow that environment to in any way come around on me in a negative way. So I just simply moved forward, and it was great. It was an excellent experience. But I was aware of the environment and this concept that if I could have stood up and addressed the room, I would have truly said probably 90% of you are stuck in a false narrative because of the problems that you're talking about are really manifested into your life. Their problems have become their life, and their solution is to have the government provide them with just enough that they could live on that would somehow allow them to exist. And that's such a hard way to live.
It is. And it's really something, too, that you came up with this topic today, because all week long, the other co-hosts and I have been talking a lot about storytelling and about the stories that we tell ourselves and how we can, we obviously have the opportunity to change that narrative whenever we want to, and changing that self-talk is actually a very good idea. But here you are telling yet another story about the self-talk, about the stories that we tell to ourselves. Those stories, I mean, I can give you another example. It's a negative example of what happens when you don't carefully monitor your own self-talk. And I actually did it this morning. I did it unintentionally. I got up really early. I usually sleep right through, but last night I was like awake at 3:30, 4 o'clock, and I tried going back to sleep. Didn't work. So, well, I might as well get up and get some of that work done I was talking about with you before the show, right? And so I get up, and of course the cat, first thing, he wants to go outside, right? He always wants to go outside first. Now, I have to give you a preface here. The preface is Joy hasn't been in a cat fight in certainly over half a year. I think it's been over a year. But what was going through my head? It's like early morning hours. It's a perfect time for cats to fight. And I started playing out this scenario in my head about this cat fight. And I didn't even realize what I was doing, but I was doing it. And then I let him out, and not 10 minutes later, he gets into a cat fight. And so I go out there, and I'm yelling to break up the fight so that the other cat goes running away. He goes running up a tree. I can't even see anything because it's pitch black outside, right? I'm scrambling around trying to find a flashlight, all this other stuff. I finally find the flashlight. I finally find that he's climbed a tree. I get him down the tree, get him inside, and I said to myself, why did I focus on them having a cat fight? Why did I even do that to myself? Yeah. I mean, it was crazy. You talked about using the law of attraction against you. That's exactly what I did. Now, like you said, I didn't do it intentionally, but I did it. And it's like one more reminder, Walt, you got to pay attention to what you're thinking about.
Well, and that is where I think that most of us that are practitioners in the law of attraction and try to implement it, the discovery of the intentional manifestations it's just taking place. But in the day-to-day minutia of life, it's those moments that you're talking about. I had this almost a similar story. It's been probably, I don't know how long the story was, but it's been a few years ago. And I had a business meeting that I needed to get to, and I was negligent in not having my dress slacks cleaned, and they really should be hand washed only or done at the cleaners. And so the night before, of course, I discovered the pants aren't there, so I have to hand wash them. Then I hang them up in the bathroom on a hanger. It's very simple stuff, and no big deal. But you want them to dry. You can't throw them in a dryer. You want them to dry overnight. So I hung them up nicely, and the next morning as I got up, now you got a picture of this is hanging on the rod that holds up the shower curtain in my shower. And I'm about to take a shower, so I want to move those pants. And as I'm reaching for them, I'm going, I don't want to knock those off because the shower's still wet or it's got that soap scum. I don't want to knock them off into that. Oh. And as I'm reaching, I knock them off into the shower.
Oh man, you can just see it coming.
And then of course the black, they're these very nice black dress. So the soap scum then gets on and I'm laughing. It's not even anger, it's laughing because I just brought that about.
I just did it.
I could do that 1,000 times on any other day and never knock them off. So I quickly turn it into something funny. So look, I'm not. I do have 9 of the pair. I have a gray flag. It didn't matter. I just changed it up, but the concept was funny because I brought that about, and it's just you see that when you're walking through the minutia part of life, where you're on autopilot. That's the most likely time that you'll have not negative thoughts as much as just thoughts that don't serve you, and how the law of attraction just is again, it blindly responds to what you're thinking about, blindly.
I was just realizing there's an old cliche, and it came to mind as you were describing your situation with the pants there, and as you're telling it, I'm realizing the cliche actually has some truth to it, but not in a way we normally would have expected. When you look at it from an LOA perspective, it makes total sense. The cliche is the butter down rule, right? The butter down rule is where you have a piece of toast and you have butter on it, and as you're spreading the butter on, it slips out of your hand and falls face down on the floor. So the butter is down on the floor, and you basically just ruined your toast. And the butter down rule is that anytime you drop something, it's always going to be butter down. And I just realized why. It's because we expect the butter to be down. I mean, it's actually a 50-50 chance. But because we expect the butter to be down, sure enough, it's down. And then when we think about the butter down rule, that's when we drop the piece of toast. It's like, oh my goodness. I had no idea that this little cliche actually tied into LOA.
Well, and that's where this, when you take it further, the Murphy's Law, what will go wrong.
Murphy's Law, yeah.
Whatever possibly could go wrong will go wrong. Well, it's true, not because of the law being accurate. If your belief was what's right can only go, will always go right whenever possible, that's Murphy's Law. Murphy's Law isn't about one negative. It's about the outcome of what you're anticipating. And so I have shared this before on the show about a lady that in the middle of my addiction, I really, really did some stuff that I'm not really proud of. And I lived with this lady for a short period of time and took money from her. And I always felt really bad about that. And one of the things that when I was there, and I didn't stay very long because she was truly and in my world, this is a pretty broad statement, she's probably the most negative person I'd ever met in my life. Her mouth is complaining about her situation or who was in there, her mom was wrong, her ex-husband was wrong, her previous 4 boyfriends were wrong, her 5-year-old son was wrong. Everybody was wrong. This huge conspiracy was to make this lady's life miserable from her perspective. And of course, I didn't add to that when I took money and left. So I certainly, I was part of her law of attraction. Now, that was a horrible event for me. And so years later in recovery, part of my plan of recovery includes complete and full restitution to everyone. And I had actually forgotten about her, so I wanted to make restitution. So I began, once I hired, this before the internet really got rolling, I actually hired somebody to try to track her down. I couldn't find her. Well, once Facebook became so popular, she had changed her name, but I remembered her son's name. He was a grown man at this point. So I looked him up and then found her first name, and I said, okay, now I have it. So I almost Facebook Messenger her, but I wanted to check her profile, so I started reading. And Walt, 20 years later, she still had this. Every post on her Facebook wall was about how everybody had wronged her. They continued to wrong her. I guess she's on her 4th husband now who wronged her. Her kids are still disappointing her. She's still ill, and all of these things. And I said, whoa. I didn't want to be drawn into that, so I easily found out. You find out people's address pretty easily. So I just sent her a money order for to cover it, and with no explanation. I just sent her a money order, and it was cashed, and so that I know it was taken care of. But my shock, but not really, was a 20-year span has passed, and she was still complaining about her problems or telling everybody about her problems and energizing those problems in the field of the law of attraction or thought attraction.
Yeah. Sure.
It's energizing it, and we're putting it out there. And she continued for 20 years to live in this self-induced hell that she was creating by constantly talking about her problems.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, you see it all the time, but isn't it just amazing all the different ways that we do that, exactly that kind of thing to ourselves? And people do it, like you say, they do it for decades without noticing.
Right. Well, one of the things that I've been recently studying is the concepts of when you're working with people it's helping them to see there's the statement of their perceived fact. Everything keeps happening to me in a bad way. That's their perceived statement of fact.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So then you hopefully show them that's not accurate. If it were accurate, you wouldn't be alive. I mean, there's everything not bad. What you're seeing is you are picking up on everything that's negative, and then you're focusing on it and you're energizing it. So it's sort of like, what was your biggest problem, Walt, 1 year ago today?
I barely remember what I had for lunch yesterday. You want me to remember a year ago?
Right. Yeah. No, it is meant to not be able to answer because what you were perceiving as your biggest problem 1 year ago today is not relevant. it doesn't matter.
Yes.
It was not a problem at all.
Right. True.
And so, but a year ago today, for a lot of people, whatever they're focusing on today, oh, this is horrible, I won't be able to do this or won't be able to do that. Well, a year from now probably won't be that relevant.
This is true.
But when you're in the middle of it, so helping people see that, and you know, I had another example of and I quickly got in front of this. My taxes on a good year are complicated. This year they're just crazy. I have multiple revenue streams. That's not a bad thing, but when it comes to taxes, you got 1099s and
right.
1099Ks and 1090, all these things, and so I'm gathering them. And I had, for a period of time, I was working for another company, and they sent me two 1099s, one wrong, one right. And I'm trying to figure out, did they file both of them, and then on top of that, I have the book royalty for the year came in, and so I'm trying to get all of this organized, and I started getting concerned about where are we at, and and I said, okay, so fortunately for me, I quickly know my way to respond to that. Instead of worrying about my taxes and did they get it right, I sat down, and what I do is I use a combination of TurboTax and an accountant, and it's the best way for me to do it.
That's good.
I began filling out the TurboTax and plugging things in, and then I was able to say, okay, this is not a big deal. I only have one or two little questions I need to ask, and I'll be in good shape. And I was able to calm myself by taking action on something that I was beginning to worry about. And to be honest with you, there's a wonderful thing that the government allows in taxes is adoption credit, which is a large amount of money that they give you a credit for. And so forgetting about all that, as I'm doing my taxes, they asked that question, I was like, oh my God, for the first time in years, I may even be getting a few dollars back. So it turned into a really positive thing. But you see my point.
Yeah.
That we as I don't know, warriors or conditioned warriors are almost as, since childhood, let's mark the negative stuff with historical data and that is negative, we think is negative. And so we attach to that, so we start anticipating and worrying and complaining about our problems or what we perceive as our problems based on, oh boy, I'm worried about this. And it just flags it into the law of attraction. And that's everything in a nutshell. So on either side, you can do the opposite of that and get into a thriving mindset.
And isn't that a nice change when you do that? Because,
yes.
First of all, it means that we've learned, when we get to that point and we make that shift, we've learned to start changing our self-talk, to start changing the story that we tell to ourselves and the story that we tell to others. And it can take a while to learn how to do that. That's one of the things we kept talking about a lot earlier this week. It can take a while to learn how to tell your new story because it feels so uncomfortable. Because we're trying to tell a story that is not what is, right? It's not the current reality. Well, I can't lie about it, right? And that's what it feels like. We have to actually remember when we were kids, we were really good at imagining things. So we have to treat it as an imagination exercise and a pretend exercise, a make-believe exercise. And then do the make-believe knowing that ultimately our brains are not going to be able to distinguish between the make-believe and the real, which is a really interesting phenomenon. And again, something else we're talking about a lot this week. In fact, something that was really interesting, Tom and Wendy, and I think Cindy too, at various times, started telling self-talk stories. In other words, here's what their current self-talk is that they're working on to help change their mindset and change their reality. And as I was listening to them tell the stories, now I knew in each of the three cases that these were just stories they were telling to me and to the audience. But as I was listening, I found myself kind of falling into the space of this is what's really happening to them. And then I had to remind myself, oh, no, wait, they're just telling me what their self-talk stories were. So I was pulling myself back. And then moments later, I'd be right back, and they're telling me what's actually going on in their lives. And then, oh, no, that's their self-talk. It was like this tennis match I was playing with myself. I was pulling myself back, and then my brain was saying, no, this is real. This is the real thing. It was just phenomenal to watch.
And that's such a great example. The self-talk and learning to, one of the things that I instinctively do, and I try not to do this because 90% of people don't get this at first, but when somebody says, Joel, I lost my job, my response is, congratulations.
Yeah, right.
And I do that because I have seen, at least in my environment, a lot of people come to me with that, and that being one of the problems. I have seen the greatest success come from someone losing a job, often unfairly, or losing a job they thought they loved. And my very situation that I'm in right now, my exact life I have was created by me losing a job or separating from a company that I thought I would be with the rest of my life.
And you thought it was going to be a really good gig too. I remember that one.
Yeah, and it was something that I had dreamed about. I thought it was God inspired and law of attraction created, and so the thought that me not being with that, it just happened. It fell apart in a weekend, and wow, I mean, I was really having a hard time seeing that being a positive, but I also was well into my journey in the law of attraction, and I refused to succumb to the negative self-talk that goes with that. And with the benefit now, I believe it's we're coming on 5 years now since I've been gone. I'll be honest with you. Oh my goodness, I can't imagine not having the life I have today. If that makes any sense. So
it makes a lot of sense.
Yes. So with that, I have learned no matter what has happened since then, and we have had so much great stuff happen. We have had, just and all of this sort of emanates from. In fact, I recently had spoken with one of my I guess coworkers, I'd say back then, and that person is equally thriving in their own little direction. And I was really, really enjoyed talking to when we left about the same time. And the reality of where our life is now, the concept that there's not a dollar figure that would get me to go back to that same environment.
Isn't that interesting too?
Yeah.
I mean, because it means it's not about the money. That's what's interesting about it.
Right. It brought me to this point in life where, and that was a necessary part of the journey to get me where I'm at. Let me be clear. I have no preconceived issues here that, I needed that place, that stop, that part of my journey. But I was working, in a not that this matters, but I'd get to work at 8:30 in the morning. I'd go to 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I was on call every time a problem happened. I was running in there. I still had a great life and made a very good income doing that. I also was pretty much living someone else's dream, even though the vision of the treatment center was what I wanted, and to propel me into my own individual practice, where my schedule is my schedule, my direction is my direction, and I can adapt my theory as I go, and I'm not stuck with someone else's vision and what I'm trying to do. And the evolution of the law of attraction in my practice and stuff has grown, I'm working in this field of metaphysics, which is it's a big category of the law of attraction. And none of this would have happened, Walt, if I didn't have that. So that devastating, what seemed like a devastating loss from a job, I did not allow that to sit with me more than a few minutes. It was scary that first Monday morning. In I don't know how many years I wasn't going into an office. Yeah. But thank goodness that event happened. It changed. I have, I've had really, really just such a growth because of that. And so that inner dialogue piece, when we have events happen and that worry of talking about our problems or, I know people are going through that, and most people aren't in the law of attraction field the way I am. So I do need to watch my congratulations when something like that happens.
Right.
But, it is going to, once they grasp, this will if you allow it, it will take you to that next step.
It's amazing, too, because I remember 5 years ago, that's when you and I first met online. We met and we did an interview. I interviewed you as one of the early interviewees for the podcast. And then it was shortly after that, I mean, we kind of lost touch for a bit because obviously it was just a one-time interview. And then the next time we connected, which was about, what was it, like 2 years later or something like that, you told me, oh, yeah, shortly after that, I lost the job. And I said, whoa, what happened? Because you did enjoy it at the time. That's what was so interesting about it. You enjoyed it very much. And yet, when you told the story, which you just reiterated, about how you lost it and how it actually turned out to be a great thing, it became really evident it was a great thing. And what was really amazing, I remember at the time, was how quickly you filled in your essentially your new work schedule as a self-employed person doing the same thing. How quickly it all filled in for you, because it filled in what, like 2 weeks or something like that, some crazy amount.
Yeah, it was really almost unreasonable how quickly it filled in, and I my perception was, okay, I'm starting a new business, and I was focusing on the fact that even though I'd lost the job, I was able to save up. I had at least a year or two's worth of savings that I was going to be fine to allow my business to grow.
That helps a lot.
So I was prepared. It does. So I had no stress about worrying about making it. I wasn't under the gun there. So I was able to sit back and just take a deep breath and so this will be successful. I know it will. Within 2 weeks, I was close to full, and I ended up making a little more money that year than I would have if I would have stayed at the company. I mean,
that's crazy.
The amazing thing. And the following year, my first full year in practice, I made substantially more than I would have if I'd stayed with that company. So it has been, and I've never looked back. So the inner dialogue that we work on is such an important, relevant piece, and like we said earlier, the minutiae part of the day is where you got to guard yourself, because you're really working on this. You're taking care of the big stuff. It's the little stuff that'll sneak up on you. And what is your problem today? What is, if you were to ask me right now, what is your biggest concern today? And I don't know what that would be.
That's nice.
I mean, everything's where it should be. I have the life I want. I have goals. I want to see where this goes. I hope our radio show takes off. I see that. I'm not worried about that. I'm planning on that to happen, but that's not by no means am I putting out a negative with that. We're working on this book together. All the host and additional life coaches are working on what I think will be an incredible book.
Well, I think so too.
We have this concept of things are pretty good right now. So let's keep that going and not allow any potential worry to get in my life. So I don't waste time worrying about stuff that'll happen. And that is one of the greatest gifts the law of attraction gave me.
Yes, I would agree also for myself as well. I wanted to ask you, because I don't know if I ever asked you this before. I might have. But do you recall back when you first got exposed to the law of attraction, that was when you were pretty much in one of your worst periods of your life and you were starting to climb out. Do you recall what you used, what method you used in order to basically change that self-talk? Because I'm sure you went through the same kind of negative self-talk we've all gone through, and you probably went through it in a really bad way.
Oh, yeah.
What was going on? Do you remember what you did, what steps you took in order to change that?
Well, I remember the generalized theory of what I did. I first started what I call, and I think everybody goes through this progression, I started doing fake positive talk.
Mm-hmm.
Things are great. Well, okay, I'm just got out of jail. I have no money.
Right.
And, well, things are great. Saying it it isn't necessarily relating to the emotional feeling of that.
Right. Yeah.
I had to sort of develop the idea that I had, instead of just saying it, and I think that's where a lot of people, when you watch the movie The Secret or you read the book, and again, a great introductory to the law of attraction theory.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
It doesn't. I think a lot of people get disappointed because it almost makes it say, okay, just think happy thoughts and things will be great. No, it's that emotional belief. It's what you're believing. Now, the inner dialogue can help you change what you're believing, but you've got to truly believe it. So what I had to start doing was identifying things that I did that were tangible to me. I remember when I was able to save up and buy a car after all this was coming. By no means was a nice car, but it was a car. So
Right.
I focused on the fact that I wouldn't have to rely on other people for transportation, that I now had my own transportation, and I was really pleased with that car. I really was. I started looking
Sure.
at that. What do I have that I've had days where I've had to sleep outside in the depths of my addiction. So the fact that the place I was staying at was not the nicest place in the world, there are far worse places. I just enjoyed looking at the positive of that. I had my own space. I had food. And so it was the really basic stuff that I would just focus on what I did have. So I had to learn. I started with just the idea of trying to see it from a superficial level. But I later, as I progressed, you have to feel it. You have to believe it. It has to match you can't say that, okay, things are great, but my life sucks on the same time. Though you can't occupy those same thoughts at the same time.
That's true. Yeah.
And one of the unintentional events in the law of attraction, and I didn't understand this mindset because my addiction took me all the way to jail. And we talked about this before.
Sure.
One of my big worries and fears in life, and as I was leading up to the climax of my addiction where everything fell apart, was worried about going to jail. I was just scared to death of going to jail. So, and I think that's probably normal. I hope that's everybody's fear.
I would say so.
You don't want that. Yeah. And so, but my life was, even though I was worried about it, everything I was doing in my life was leading me to that was going to happen.
Right.
So when all this fell apart and the money that I embezzled from a previous company and all this was taking place, it all caught up with me. And in October of 1995, I was randomly arrested, October 11th at 11:42 a.m. You'd never forget that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And I was arrested, in Manatee County in Florida, which is just south of Tampa. Tampa's in Hillsborough County, and I was transported up to about an hour drive up to the jail. And I shared this with you before, Walt. The moment I was arrested, I wasn't near as scared as I thought I would be. In fact, there was almost a little bit of relief. But when I went into the jail, and they put you in the orange jumpsuit and they send you back to your little area and they shut the door, the opposite reaction of what I thought. I was like, oh, thank God this is over. I can now move on. Mm-hmm. I didn't know at that moment, am I going to be in jail for 50 years? Now, unlikely for what I did.
Right.
But you don't know that. I don't know what that was. But I didn't care because it was such a beautiful, does that make sense? It was such a release.
It was a release, yeah.
And, yeah. And it's like I have dreaded this my entire existence of my addictive behavior. And now that it's here, it's not near as bad as I thought. And so I had this feeling that was the opposite. So really that was a moment where I started to understand my emotional thought. I was freer in jail than I was in my addiction. And that was a new thought string for me. It wasn't a negative. Well, nobody wants to be in jail, but nobody wants to live like I was living before either. That wasn't free.
Yeah, that was actually much more miserable.
It's much more miserable. And in fact, I'm dealing with a young man right now that I have. He's dug himself in such a downward spiral that it's inevitable that he is going to lose everything because he won't stop.
Wow.
And I told him the other day, when you let go of the chase and just realize, you are kicking the can down the road and creating a lot more stress. You've already lost everything. You just haven't allowed yourself to experience it. That's when his jump up will happen. And this is a great time. That was a great time for me of when I started slowly understanding that it isn't just positive thinking that does this. Positive thinking is a part of it. But I at least this isn't science, but I try to envision it this way. The negative thinking patterns get stored in the primitive part of the brain, where the instincts, where we basically just breathe and our heart beats and stuff like that. And you don't, it's the subconscious side. You don't have direct access to that part of the brain, but you do have secondary access by what you program into your brain that eventually gets back there. I programmed that I was an addictive loser that was destined for nothing. And the law of attraction fulfilled that. Once I reprogrammed it and you're successful despite all this, you're coming back, those other parts aren't relevant, here's the new part of your life, then that became my reality. And so feeling it, me understanding of the inner dialogue told a story that I eventually convinced my subconscious was true, and then the law of attraction responded to that.
So in a sense, going back to my original question, what you really ended up doing to change your mindset was kind of, in a sense, done to you by your experience. And you found, it was kind of the hard road out, but you found the road out, and as you found it out, you found yourself changing your self-talk.
Right. And I've had later events that have happened, but just, sticking back to that point in time where that's when the discovery happened. I had life events happen, and you hear this all the time. And I had heard all the cliches and all the stuff before. When you're in the middle of it, nobody cares about a cliche. The old adage that, life isn't what happens to you, is how you respond to it. Well, that's wonderful unless you're in the middle of a bunch of crap. Then you're, so it that doesn't seem to help. But when you really apply that, when you really realize, wait a minute, here I am today, here's where I'm at. And at this moment, I am going to either continue to keep digging this hole deeper, or I want to change the way that the only thing that I at that point could control was my view of things. And that was the awakening. When I lost control of everything else, all that remained was my perspective that I was in control of, which is our greatest power. But I didn't implement that. It's almost like, let me try everything else before I try this. And then there's no other option, so let's change my perspective. And then when I realized the perspective is the driving energy of our reality, and knowing you're in control of that, you immediately you take control of your reality. And that becomes the greatest gift for people. But you have to get to it in the increments you could take that. What I'm telling you is hard for somebody. If this is their first show, they're going, what is he talking about? How I can't change my reality by just changing it. But you can, because it's all of how you view things. It is. I look back on the early parts of my recovery. We talked about this either the week before or 2 weeks ago. But what I viewed was suffering at the early part of my recovery. I now look back with great fondness. It was me really starting to enjoy myself. I really loved my life early in my recovery. I had conditioned myself that this was suffering, but the truth was it was growth. It was exciting. And now that I see that, I wasn't viewing it that way, but now I retroactively can say I can see where that was such a benefit to me. So since all of that historically has happened, I now, no matter what happens in my life, and as you know, a lot of stuff has happened in my life, no matter what happens, I have the ability to I insist on maintaining control of my perspective. Nothing can happen that isn't filtered through my perspective. And no matter what does, I have the ability to say, I'm handling this with a positive perspective. What is this going to bring? I might not even know what this is going to lead to, but it certainly isn't going to derail me in any way. It doesn't have that ability anymore. And I'd mentioned earlier about this other company that I'd worked with, and when I realized, wait a minute, I don't want to fall back into a pattern that I want to be. The moment I realized that, I moved on from that company. That moment, I moved away.
Yeah.
And again, great relationship with them now and all that. It didn't get to a negative. There was nothing. I just no. I didn't make the right decision by going there, and I made it just based sort of on an ego base. You're going to get this wonderful title and this great salary. Well, I have a great salary, and I have my title's whatever I'm making right now. So, I could call myself whatever I want to call myself in my own company. So I had, it isn't about doing it perfectly along the way as we go, but it's about adjusting your sail as you go, aiming your perspectives, looking at where you're at. Those are the exciting events we're dealing with, Walt.
Oh, yeah. And I kind of want to take us back a little bit to the topic in a way, because we did lay out in the beginning what we were talking about, but I want to revisit it, because this whole idea of, I'll call it addictive self-talk, addiction to negative self-talk is so prevalent. It's something that I don't think there's anybody I know who doesn't engage in it, and most of the people I know engage in it a lot. Some are more successful than others. Some are in really bad situations. It varies from person to person. But the one common element is all the debilitating ways that people either talk themselves down or talk others down. But it's truly, it evidences itself as addictive behavior. And so I guess what I want to ask you is, first of all, why do you think it's so prevalent? And second of all, okay, we've talked about all these great things about, how you can hit bottom, and there's actually a way you can climb out by changing the self-talk and so forth. But before you've gotten there, is there a way to prevent yourself from slamming to the ground? Is there a way to notice it and say, you know what, this self-talk really is debilitating to myself, and to become aware of it before the whole thing just falls apart?
Yes, the answer is yes. But again, there has to be something that makes you believe in what we're saying. Most of the time, when you talk about the term hitting the bottom or falling out or hitting whatever that term is, it's when there's no other option that it requires you to look at all other options. When you run out of options, you got to say, okay, what's even left? And so that's why for many people, they find that's the moment they're able to change this differently. However, at any point in time, anybody can flip the switch of I'm going to stop the negative, addictive self-talk. The concept that was handed down for generations of anticipating the negative or how horrible things are, or let me just tell everybody how bad I'm doing, or what's going on, and that becomes such a habit that until there has to be some event in most cases for that to happen. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody could say, I see the downward spiral now. If somebody's listening right now, they're seeing the downward spiral. They haven't hit a definition of a bottom where everything fell apart at this point. They have all they have to do is snap their fingers. It's instantaneous when you make that change. Most people don't buy into it enough until there's such a need that they reach out, and now it's time. But it can. I've seen a couple of people that have really stopped the downward spiral and immediately changed that. I pointed out all the time. My mother, before she passed away, was making progress, and she spent a lifetime of worrying and talking about her problems and anticipating more problems, and while she never totally got a handle on it, she was working on it. She identified it, and she said, I do need to do better at this. So there can be a process. It's just, and again, I got to look at it from my field. By the time somebody comes to me, life is usually at that point where they're willing to pay somebody else to help them with this problem. So,
right.
I might not be the best, source of that, because most of what I see is people that have hit a bottom of types where they just have no option but to move forward.
But getting back to the first part of the question, which is recognizing it, because I don't think a lot of people really recognize that they're doing it. I know I didn't recognize
Right.
it. My wife had to point it out to me. I didn't realize I was pouring out this steady stream of negativity. I just thought of myself
Yes.
as somebody who was kind of coping with life. And that's why I'm wondering, do you think it has to be pointed out to you? Is there a way that you think people can notice it on their own? I mean, what's your take on that?
Well, yes, I do think that it there, and that's what I was trying to say. You actually gave me a better way of putting it. That there has to be a catalyst of some sort. That catalyst can be self-discovery. You can watch a book, a movie, or read a book that actually touches that. You say, "Aha, that is me." But most often, I think somebody that you unconditionally care about needs to point that out to you. I find it interesting that the majority of people that believe they have a really positive view on life have the opposite. It's because they don't see it. So the idea that there has to be some intervening force, and it could be anything from simply you making a self-discovery, having a dream, or just realizing, wait a minute, what I worried about, that's the reason I asked you what was your biggest problem 1 year ago today.
Yeah.
I'm sure if you thought about the problem 1 year ago today, but today it's not even relevant. You don't even know what it was.
No, not at all. That's true.
So that, that, and I've had some people say, well, I don't remember the exact problem, but I mean, it probably was me worried about money. And well, okay,
there's your clue.
Let's fill in some blanks here.
Yeah, right.
Because I'm worried about the same thing a year later. So maybe, but there needs to be a catalyst of some type that gets somebody to where they need to be. And often it's family members. Often it's just an event, or you see a repetitive behavior, read a book, hear a fortune cookie or something that makes you click. But I don't know of many people that have ever. I'm trying to think of any example of somebody that without a catalyst or some type of an awakening moment to get this. And I'm not aware of anybody. But I don't want to say it can never happen. It's just I'm not aware of that yet.
Well, you certainly touched on an interesting possibility there, because the possibility is, what if someone realized that the thing they're worried about today is the same thing they were worried about a year ago, which is the same thing they were worried about a year before that, which is the same thing they were worried about a year before that. You get enough of a pattern there, you can say, oh, there's a pattern there. And it's a negative pattern. It's been going on for quite some time. So even though I may not be aware that there's a steady stream of negativity coming out of my mouth, at least I can recognize that there's that pattern. Maybe that's enough in some cases. Right. I don't know.
Right. Well, and it could be. And one of the things that I always encourage people to do, and nobody ever does this, but if you journal, and journaling.
Actually, there are people who journal, I found out. Believe it or not, I'm finding more and more people who actually do journal. I was amazed.
Right. It's one of those things that every therapist in the world recommends, and probably 0.03% of the people who recommend it to do. But the idea that if you could look back and say, what were your thoughts a year ago? To me, that's the biggest thing. If your whole life is, I know one gentleman, and he may be listening, and he's a good friend, but he is he has a relationship issue. He wants a relationship so desperately. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is his every waking moment is in looking for a relationship that he wants. However, his parameters around the relationship that he's seeking is not even remotely plausible. Mm. It's just without even getting details. I don't want to.
Right. Sure.
But what he's looking for just isn't a plausible scenario for him. And so, within this, every year, and the reason that I'm thinking about this on Valentine's Day, it's all joking, but it's 30 posts about how he doesn't have a girlfriend, or he's another year without a girlfriend, and it's such an event that the concept of the negative self-talk, it keeps inviting itself, and a year from now, he'll have the exact same post. And 2 years from now, it'll be the exact same post until he changes he thinks he needs in a relationship. His a thought about being lonely all the time. I'm lonely. He has a good job. He's well respected. There's a lot of things that are going on that are very positive in life, but the overall loneliness factor is what he keeps inviting. And he tried to touch base with him on it, and he dismisses it pretty easily. But he's got to come to that himself.
Yeah.
So you see that on a regular basis. But I also have the other side where they identify 1 year ago, I was worried about money because 1 year ago before that I was worried about money. Well, you've made it through life all this time. You always manage. At some point, can you quit worrying about it? You know, if the last 5 years you've been worried about money, but yet you're still here and thriving or surviving at least, you're able to make it. So can we quit worrying about it at some point? And that's when they have that. Yes, you're right. You know, money used to be a big driving factor in my life. It isn't a factor anymore. I have an abundance, and I will have the ability to make money, and all that's great. And it's not even a factor anymore. And since it's not a factor of a concern, it flows freely, and that's the beauty of it. That's the good side of the pod. And everybody that's listening right now, whatever your thing is, this is about. You know, I hope you get from this whole thing, what you talk about, both consciously and subconsciously, both outwardly and inwardly, you're programming your subconscious to believe what you're saying. And the more you realize you can change that, and the moment you find yourself going back into the addictive pattern, you know, I don't know how many people I see every day, but one of the things I do every day of my life is I go to the gym. I see the same group of people for the last 10 years. Don't know most of their names, but every day, how you doing? Well, hi, how you doing is really I have people say, I'm great today. How are you? My response is always amazing. It's an amazing life. Thank you for asking. And I move on.
Yep.
And I have some people that'll say, oh, yeah, well, it's okay. That's the spirit. You know, I almost like jokingly say, okay, you know, you're here, you're working out, you're in the gym. Let's look at it from where you could be, what could be happening, and everybody that is going to decide how they feel today, it isn't what happens today. It's what you do with what happens today that's going to make your day good or bad. Your perspective being in your control. Things are happening to us all the time. Our perspective of what's happening. That's what that inner dialogue. You can reframe that. You can even go backwards in time and reframe the inner dialogue that you're about what you think of something that happened in the past and change its effect on you today. That's a really powerful event. That it is life altering when you realize it. It's very exciting.
It is, and it's also something that I when I was first trying to reprogram myself, I also had to give myself a little special dispensation, because when you have that self-talk that's negative, that's been going on for so long, what you want to have happen is, okay, I'm going to start trying some affirmations. I'm going to try to change a few things around, and I want to see some results. And then you don't see results right away. Well, you got all this negative momentum that's been building up for years. You know, you have to give yourself a little time to, let it turn around. And it's not going to happen right away. And you're going to slip. You're going to make mistakes. And you have to allow that too. You have to kind of forgive yourself for that. But you got to give yourself the time, and you got to keep after it and keep after it and keep after it. That's what I found. I found the most important thing was persistently keeping after it and not worrying about the fact that it hasn't shown up yet, that I haven't gotten better yet. It takes a little time.
That is the answer to many problems in life, or most situations in life, is allowing it to happen. You cannot expect a lifetime of negative thinking and self-defeating thoughts to change in 2 days. You can feel better. There could be immediate results from you feeling better.
You do, yeah.
The example I used earlier in the show, I was prepared when I walked in the Social Security office to sit there for 4 hours that day. I wasn't worried about it. I was there for 30 minutes. I prepared myself. Don't I can't do this right. I'm destroying my life. I'm thinking wrong. Give yourself a break. Yeah. This works. You just have to give it time to work, Walt.
And unfortunately, we've run out of time, so we can't talk about how much time it takes to work. But this has been great. I love the fact we talk about this because it is just wonderful. Let's do it again next week.
All right, Walt. Great to talk to you again, my friend.
Good talking to you, and we hope you'll all come back as well next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.